Right, welcome to Dr. Carl Society Mission. This is economics. This is miscellaneous. Of course, we have selected courses or selected topics that we discuss, and then we'll have some work examples also to look at. So the first thing that I want us to talk about, we'll talk about the market structure. We have different types of market structure. Okay, the categorization, of course, is based on certain factors, and it's just not an arbitrary kind of categorization. So this is as a result of the market forces trying to shape the structure of markets, and then by this market forces structuring of the market, we have about 4 categories of market structure that we can have. So we have the first ideal way or ideal one that is likely to happen. That is, if we had a homogeneous product. If we had a homogeneous product and it's so huge, I mean, it's common on the market, everybody can get into that business, everybody can live it as well. Okay, so that is a perfect competition. There are no restraints to entry and exit. Okay, now in that situation, you have what we call the perfect market or the perfect competition market structure. Now this perfect competition market structure will have 2 types of curves. Okay, so for each industry curve or industry curves. Now when I say industry, I'm talking about the collection of the various firms forming the market. Okay, market suppliers. Of course, the household is going to buy from these firms, and they are the consumers. Okay, or they are on the side of the side that is demanding. Okay, so back to the curves I was talking about. So for perfect competition market structure, what happens is you have 2 curves. The curves for the industry will be different from the curves for the individual firms. Why? This is the reason. Now, if you look at the industries, already said we have collection of firms. So let's assume the curve for the industry is, looking at the slope, we can talk about elasticity. Now, for the industry, the elasticity will not be as the individual firms will be. Now, if you take the individual firm, the curve, the demand curve will be more horizontal or flat. Okay, now this is telling you that it is more elastic, almost near 1. Okay, that is perfect elastic. Okay, now the reason is for the individual firm, they have a certain portion of the market. Okay, but this is small. This is very small because we have a lot of firms. Okay, and then the product is homogeneous, the same product. So these individuals have little control over pricing, have little control over quantities to produce. Okay, because they just simply have to take prices on the market. Right? So in this case, if an individual firm in this perfect competition market structure decides to increase his or her price, the only thing that will happen is people forming part of his share, the market share for him, will leave his firm for other firms with relatively lower prices. Okay, so lower price. Now this would mean he's going to lose. You get it? So the degree of customers or consumers leaving you when you increase your price, what we call the price elasticity of demand, would be grave or would be big as compared to the industry. So when you take the industry curve for demand, that will not be as elastic as that of the firm. So it's not going to be horizontal. It will be that kind of slant. It's not as elastic as the firm. The reason is the reverse of what I said. So here we have the sum of the individual firms. Okay, so what every individual firm can, every individual firm consumers are given in terms of their demand curve would be not as elastic as the individual firms one. Okay, so it means if we take the whole group as one, you cannot exit that market because the other products do not share the same homogeneity as the industry that you are in. Okay, so there's no that degree that you can move to another industry, because with respect to that product we are talking about, that is what you need. Okay, we do not have other forms that look like it. But in the case of the firms forming the industry, what they are producing is being produced by other firms, so you can easily leave but remain in that same industry for that same product because it's homogeneous. Now, the same reasons will apply when we go down the ladder to discuss the monopolistic competition market structure. Now, the issue for us here is to sequentially try to make the teaching more intuitive. Now, so we are moving down from perfect competition to one where we have some degree of differentiation with respect to the produce or what the firms are or the industry is producing. So here for monopolistic, we have fewer firms as compared to the industry. As compared to the perfect competition. The fewer firms, they also have degree, or they have a portion of the market. They have a certain percentage of the market for themselves, and they have some control in terms of price and quantity to set their business rolling. Okay, so this control that they have, okay, would mean the slope or the demand curve for them between the individual firm and the industry would approximate, would be almost the same. Okay, right. So the difference would not be like between the individual firms, as in, the individual firms in the perfect competition and then the industry in perfect competition. So here, let's look at how the slope is going to be like. So for the monopolistic competition market structure, you have the slope, okay, not being the perfect elastic one, of course, but there is some degree of elasticity because we have many firms. Okay, so when you increase your price, people still have the tendency to shift to another person for that. Here too, there will be some. They'll be competing either on they'll be competing either with respect to pricing or with respect to quantity. But remember, most firms would do that on pricing because quantity may, if we all are to increase produce, okay, or our products, that will mean we are increasing supply, and therefore our force will be lower as compared to if everything stood at a constant distance, then our force will reduce because we are now giving more of our goods. So more goods will mean with relative fixed money in circulation would mean then people are going to say, okay, there's fewer money relative to the amount of goods on the market. Therefore, the prices of these goods would then fall. All right. So usually people, these markets will compete, looking at the prices. Okay, to compete among themselves with that. All right. So let's get to. So I'm trying to go down on the curves. It's very important you grasp the concept for curves when it comes to economics, because you can pictorially use these curves to solve a lot of questions. Okay, and as you keep on doing that, you begin to grasp and then intuitively infer and being able to solve questions straight away when the questions are asked. All right, so we are still on the monopolistic competition kind of market structure. Right, so I've said the curves, they share common. It's not as different as in the case. It's not as different as we have in the case of perfect competition. Here we have the slopes. Okay, they are not as perfect. They are not as. The elasticity is not as that of the perfect competition one, where we have almost a horizontal demand curve. Okay, so this we have is slant and letter. Right. So the next thing to look at is for this monopolistic competition, you will need to also understand that demand, okay, because people are demanding with what they have, they are ready to pay that. So that will form that, and that is what they are going to use to buy or purchase what the suppliers are giving. So that becomes the revenue, the revenue they are giving. Uh, Sorry for the long break in the narration. So we'll continue. So I think we're still on monopolistic. We've talked about the curves for the industry and then for the individual firms. Like we said, the difference between these two curves are not so much. I mean, they look alike, unlike in the case of the perfect competitive market structure. So the other thing I want us to look at is the next step. So we are going in steps. The next step of market structure that you may encounter would be the oligopoly, or we have other variants like duopoly, and then ultimately monopoly. So I want us to look at all these together, but we'll also do some clarification and then speak on each of them into a bit more detail, okay, and then also give the picture, the pictorial view of their curves, which is the essence of this discussion, right? So for the oligopoly, we have fewer firms than in the monopolistic. Note, the first one, the one that we just discussed and moving on to this topic was monopolistic. It's different from oligopoly, and it's also different from the monopoly one. So the oligopoly has fewer firms than the monopolistic one, and therefore, the fewer you have, and the more power or the control you have over pricing, and then to adjust for quantity to produce and all that. But I've said the preference for pricing will be more of essence, because quantity, you can also use that. But so we have some models where quantity may be used as a form of competitive tool, or the pricing may be used, okay. But let's discuss the structure. I said, like the curves for these ones, because once you get a picture, you get the curves, you get understanding, you are able to intuitively analyze most questions that will fall under this section. So still on the curve, the first thing to talk about in terms of this curve, when it comes to oligopoly, we have what we call the king curve, but that may not be in all situations. Then we have other variant curves, okay. But the ultimate thing here is they have control over price and quantity, okay. There are fewer firms, okay. Then of course the product is also differentiated, okay, right. There's more resistance or restraint to people entering, okay. There's this constraint or obstacle to people entering, because either it could be due to any of the factors or any of the characteristics of the oligopoly itself, okay. That might prevent people from entering into that market, okay, right. So then this is where collusion and all that, I mean, the collusion, the either will form a sort of a cartel and all that. So this is where you can have these coming into the picture. All right, so for the curve, definitely it will not look like the perfect competition market structure. It will also not be almost the same as the monopolistic structure, but there will be some variant. Okay, so here, when you look at their curve, it mirrors a little of the monopolistic, but the oligopoly, and then let's do the oligopoly. Like I said, have the king one here. One particular firm, okay, tries to, let's say, adjust his or her price, okay. The other firms or the consumers may leave or may quit his products or what he's producing to buy from the other firms who may have, similar, though different, in terms of maybe branding and all that, products. Okay, so there's always that degree that people will shift. So when you adjust your price too high, then they may also they will get all your customers, so you may have to reduce it, then you come back to the same structure, okay. Quantity, if you increase quantity to get more people, then the same, you reduce the price, the price goes down, okay? So everybody, it affects everybody. Then because you are all losing, you want to adjust again so that you come back to the same level of profit. So business is about maximizing profit. So either you are using pricing, you are using quantity to produce. These factors, on your side, you might think you are outsmarting the others, okay? But when you do that, either you lose the consumers, or other people follow suit, or they also do same, and then you are brought, all of you are brought down to a level where your price maximization is affected, and therefore you have to adjust again and come back to the old thing. So you see, this kind of structure, or this kind of market, by natural forces and all that, demand and all supply, and then the competition between or among the firms will adjust so that they always stay in this structure, market structure, okay? So that is it. Now the case of monopoly itself is to the extreme. That is the extreme one, okay? And they have full control, very few, one or two, or one, right? So duopoly, monopoly, duopoly, that's, proximate on two occasions, okay? Monopoly, one, right? So here the control is bigger, okay? So they are able to, they are able to control price. They also have control over how much to produce. But like I said, pricing, that's where you can cash in, so they can adjust that. So instead of even producing what the equilibrium quantity should be, they may cut down on the quantity to produce, and then they will rather, because the quantity is low, or the quantity is smaller, you have fewer goods on the market, and therefore the price would then be higher, and they'll be making huge profits on the smaller goods they are producing. Remember, in that case, the actual demand from the consumers and the firms' supply curve are not meeting at the equilibrium point. So there's a constraint, or there's a gap. There's some sort of gap or wastage in the system. That's what we call the dead weight. Okay, so that dead weight is there. So that will not be a market structure that is good for the economy, right? So therefore, these monopolies and oligopolies and other things would have to, the government would have to come in, decide on what to do, put in some measures, okay, to address it, so that. But there are at times that monopoly and other things may be used for certain products, okay, for reasons being that characteristic, and people will not want to go into that kind of business and all. So those ones, when it get there, we'll talk about it. So let's see. That is just the summary of the market structures. But let's remember the structures: perfect competition, individual firms, different curves. Individual firms, almost flat horizontal curve. Monopolistic competition, okay, they have the elasticity is not as flat as you can find in the case of the perfect competition structure. Then down the lane, oligopoly, duopoly, monopoly, of course, they have higher degree of control, okay? But of course, because they have higher degree of control over pricing and quantity, then they will not produce what equilibrium demand, the equilibrium quantity should be. Therefore, there will be dead weight in the system, right? So those mono down, you have some degree of dead weight in the system, right? So now let's move on to the discussion, right? So we talked about monopoly. Work example is also given here: restaurants. So people with clothing, okay. So these clothing are differentiated in their products through branding, style, and marketing. So same clothing, made from the same material, but different brand names and other things. So this is by this name, Acapulco, and so on. So these, they will fall under monopolistic, okay. The products are differentiated. They are not homogeneous. They are differentiated, and then they have some, because they are branding. They could control. They can set prices for those goods they are producing. Okay, right. So that room is there for them. Now let's go to oligopoly. I said oligopoly is a market structure that is dominated by a small number of large firms. Okay, small number of large firms. Okay, so these firms are highly independent. Are highly interdependent. Like I said, if you are just surprised to people will run to the other ones, and then you have to come down. The same thing. So they are interdependent. Now we look at work examples. I've already talked about the curves. So the curves. Now let me just talk about how you deal with solving questions under market structure. So the market structure, you should first know the industry curves. You should know the individual firms curves. That if that is there, or if we have huge differences between them. Now you should also know the curves, the equation for the curves. So equation for demand, equation for supply. You should know these ones. Now once you know the equation for curve, equation for supply and all that, there's also you should also try to understand they are not just equations. You should understand what they are. For instance, if you take demand curve or demand equation, okay, you have price. I mean, you are equating quantity to price. Okay, this price also comes with some coefficient, and that is the slope. Okay, now it's negative, so it tells you slanting from left to right. Okay, it's positive, slanting from right to left. Okay, so you must have an intuitive picture of the equation and what it's telling you. You should be able to picture how the curve will look like in terms of slope, that is elasticity, in terms of the character or the type of slope, whether from left to right or right to left. Okay, so these are things that once you look at the curves, you should click. Okay, and then you move on to the next step. Now, if you have one sloping from left to right, the other sloping from right to left, of course, if they are doing that at a point, they will intersect. Where they intersect will be the equilibrium. Okay, so that equilibrium is a point, and that is where the price will be. The equilibrium price is the price on the market. All right, it's the price on the market. So the other thing is, let me also talk briefly about solving it. So if you take an equation, you also see that the equation may have a fixed number. That's the intercept. That may be the initial or the lowest point that particular curve or function can start from. Okay, the slope is the elasticity. Okay, so these things must come into play. So if they are asking for the lowest point and so on, now they are asking for the elasticity, you are looking at the slope. Okay, now where these, so sometimes we also need to look at the equations may not just be lines, they may be curves. Okay, so if they are curves, and then you need to differentiate. If you are differentiating, you are finding the slope. Okay, so that differentiating, the quantity that you are differentiating, this with respect to this, what does it form? What is the meaning of that? One changing over the other, that change, what does it tell you? Is it marginal cost, marginal